This is the FM Gold channel of All India Radio. In the program News Analysis, now we bring you a discussion on review of GST implementation. The participants are Paramjeet Khanna, expert on taxation, and Chandrasekhar, journalist.
GST, which was rolled out by the government on the midnight of June 30. Almost now, today it's 17th and almost a fortnight has passed. So we'd like to know from Mr. Khanna how he sees this fortnight and what are the complaints which he has received and how he sees the implementation and the rollout of the GST.
The GST implementation has been a dream of the past, and today no longer it remains a dream, but it is a part of the sustainable growth of agenda of the existing government. With the midnight of 30th of June, with great fanfare in the Parliament, the Finance Minister along with the Prime Minister, they rolled out the new law, the greatest historic change in indirect taxes, whereby all the taxes, octroys, levies got subsumed into one single unit rate. To put it across in a very simple way, the states have lost their sovereignty, the center has lost its sovereignty, and by the word sovereignty I mean and reflect that is the capacity and the power to levy and collect taxes. With the result, you have a single revenue neutral rate across the board in every state all over the country. With the passage of last fortnight, in fact, it has been quite an issue of a turmoil. The GST conclave, in all its wisdom, held its meetings time after time, and the lobby which they confronted from the various end users, industrialists, workers, traders, to rationalize the rate structure. So those rates were being finalized, and in the 9th, 10th, 11th meeting of the council, in the conclave, finally certain levies were withdrawn. Almost on 66 items out of 188 items were rationalized to brought down. Certain taxes were abolished and revenue rates were reduced to a zero tax for certain essential commodities so that they can arrest all the inflationary trends possibly expected in all quarters. Again, I would refer to 0% for unpacked goods, cereals, paper products, medicines, health sector, and the list is endless. Now coming back to the situation over here, that any time a government has shifted or variated from a structural set of norms to another set, that transition period has always had its original kind of hiccups. That everything which is there in the transition, a lot of suspense is created. The small traders, they are still hesitant and shy of coming forward to the GST portal. We also saw in the last 10 or 15 days before the GST was being rolled out, we found a lot of stocks being sold at throwaway prices. There were some kind of payment sales where like an air conditioner was being sold at almost a discount of 50%. So all those kind of phenomena of sales was that people didn't want to carry forward any stock on the close of business on 30th of June because they wouldn't have been able to get any input credit tax in the next following quarter for lack of evidence of that stock. In short, the stock was not accounted for, so therefore it was need to be abandoned at any cost. Coming back to on a reality check, GST has been framed as a law. And like we say that the GST as a common pool of taxes is going to have a removal of the cascading effect of tax, in the sense that tax on tax would be a arithmetic of the past. In today's date, only the value added tax would be taxed by the intermediaries. Think of a product which goes through 7 hands. So each person who's a contributory would be taken as an intermediary. GST as a normal parlance refers to a tax which is based on consumption or an end-use tax. So anyone who is not an end user, it does not have to pay any tax, but just recover a tax relatable on the value added by that intermediary. So if a product goes through 7 stages, you'll have 7 intermediaries, and each stage intermediary is going to recover the tax on its sale price minus the input tax which he'll claim for the tax paid to the earlier cumulative intermediaries. So the arithmetic becomes quite simple. But then we look at the hiccups. Therefore, considering there are going to be hiccups relating to so many things. 1. Territorial questions. 2nd, product classification sections. 3rd, the rate to be at which it is to be charged That kind of a question. The reverse charge mechanism, where you are going to be confused or not clarified, that again would necessitate a clarification. Again, goods sold and then goods reversed or goods exchanged, or goods produced in one kind of a state being sold in another state. Again, goods being sold through the e-commerce. So these were the questions. Keeping in this mind, the department of the GST, I should say the government, took a very nice initiative of FAQs. You all must have seen in the last 10 days in the newspaper frequently asked questions.
Revenue Secretary Mr. Hasmukh Adia has been taking master classes of GST, and you have also mentioned that there was FAQs. I just want to know, from the point of view of small traders especially, who may not be having enough business or who may not be having enough income to hire qualified chartered accountant, how do you see that these FAQs and these master classes, have they helped the small traders?
I would say there are two ways of looking at it. First, you look at the threshold exemption. So if there is a threshold exemption fixed at 20 lakhs, that would be decisive to make sure that you are a small trader or you're not a small trader. As of now, I think probably from the database we can easily see that there are as many as 80,000 small traders still hesitant to enter the GST portal. Why? Because maybe they are not aware of computer, or they are not computer friendly, so to say, or the traditional way of doing things is becoming a mental block in their mind, or they are scared of going into the transparency. Now, once you go into the transparency, neither your revenue can be shielded, neither your sales can be suppressed, and therefore the compliance of the GST would increase the output as well. Now, if you look at the other way, if there is a trader who is more than 20 lakhs in turnover, so he doesn't fall into the definition of a small trader, still he would be not willing to make analytical kind of a disclosure. So then there is a composition scheme which has been promulgated by the government. That composition scheme is something like an ad hoc levy. It is linked like an ad valorem. So it does not go into your detailed classification. There again, under the composition, he makes a flat payment and he gets away with it. So I think both of them, if they work parallel, they should not, in the longer run, it would be a very nice law simpliciter which will necessitate the all compliance at all levels. Also, the kind of transfer cost or the time-wise, the transportation timetable has shrunk to a great extent. Now, in fact, before the GST was being implemented, you were having about 48 hours of waiting in transit. With the removal of your chungis and your octroys and your checkposts, you find that the economy is working at a faster pace. If goods and services are able to be transported at a faster rate, that increases the pace of development in the economy.
How much impact will it have on the economy as such? There are reports, that this GST loan can push up the GDP by 1 or 2% or maybe more probably. What is your feeling?
I would not hesitate to look at my Canada as an example, because Indian economy is very close to Canada. In Canada, they had restructured their VATs and DVATs, and they had reduced the taxes by 40% by rationalizing and restructuring. And that had generated a jump of 27% in GDP in Canada. Now, I'm not looking at 27%, but certainly I'm not looking at 2% either. What I'm probably looking at is the GDP is going to rise much, much more than what it has risen ever in the history of the country. And why should that happen? Because the taxes are going down. The economy is getting built up. There is a robust wave of growth in the economy. And once the taxes are going down, the center and state are collecting less taxes. So where are the profits going? The profits are staying itself in the economy. So when the business profits are being rolled into the same productivity, into the same product and services, the economy is going to grow at a very faster rate. And applying for like a mathematician, it is possible to evolve a model by 1 upon k as a multiplier to have the growth at a much faster pace. Now, if the compliance is more, transparency is there is no unorganized or ignorant market eating into your parallel economy. In fact, if the parallel economy is brought into the regular economy, the economy becomes a giant. And once it becomes a giant, it has a higher GDP.
You mean to say that it will effectively check tax evasion?
Absolutely. Because if nothing can be hidden, then nothing can be evaded. And if nothing can be evaded, it's as transparent as a mirror. The input tax credit has a number. the output tax has a number. Now, if there is a mismatch between the two numbers, the transparency shows. It means either the intermediary number 1 has concealed his sales, or intermediary number 2 is claiming a credit for which the sales are not generated. So it's like a link, it's like a chain effect. So if at any time during the chain, there are 7 intermediaries, if a chain gets broken, the transparency shows itself, and there is, in fact, once there is lesser laws to be complied with, then compliance becomes easier. And once compliance is easier, the secretariat at the GST levels have been very well trained and groomed. In fact, like you mentioned, all these ministers are getting together, they're having the training programs. In fact, instructions have been given to all the 20 ministries that each person in the ministry should be aware about the rates, rebates, tax rates, portals, what classification of that product belongs. To take an example, the textile ministry or the processing ministry, the food ministry, each one of them should be able to identify the segmented product where it is supposed to be registered on the GST network. Again, the GST is a consolidated unitary method whereby the rates are fixed. Now, if you argue I don't fall into 5%, I fall into 18%, all those questions are addressed, those issues are answered by the FAQs being answered. And again, the government has taken out a very lenient policy for the first 3 quarters up to September. They're going to take a very lenient view if somebody is found not to comply or finding some shortage or irregularity in compliance.
Government has also said, the inspector will not be visiting establishment without proper authorization. Does this provide some comfort to small
Yes,
traders?
Definitely. In fact, the search kind of a thing or the inspection kind of a thing, that fear factor is going to be diluted for the first quarter. The promise of the government is that at the transition stage, a full level of cooperation and harmonization is going to occur, so whereby the GST implementation is a smooth event and not becomes a harrowing or a horror story in the minds of the traders.
So traders will be now more comfortable. They will come forward and register in the GST network. And
in fact, now a lot of questions are being answered on 24th of July this month. A week later, the window on the GST portal is being opened where you can upload your GST bills. So quite often anyone who is going to raise a bill is asking for your GST number. Obviously, if one GST service provider is asking another GST service provider a number, that means both the GST turnovers are being computerized.
How the chartered accountant community feels?
Chartered accountant is like a service provider, and since GST is linked on the e-portal, so therefore every return has to be filed electronically. There is no interfacing with the department. Like they have borrowed the concept from income tax, similarly the indirect taxation, the registration is done, the compliance is done, the FAQs are done, the compliance is again, some questions would arise. Then comes the stage of assessments. Even those assessments on your GST returns will take place later next year, will also be going to be there. But one beautiful thing about this is the reporting requirement is done on a monthly basis.
Prime Minister Mr. Narendra Modi has said the GST is a good and simple tax. To what extent do you agree with the Prime Minister?
I am in 100% agreement and concurrence with the statement. It's a good and a very healthy step in the direction. The economy has to grow if you give the proper compliance of the law. Our economy has been suffering from a virus. That virus has been that it is eating into the parallel economy has been eating into our system. So keeping with this, GST is one of the weapons with which the illegal transactions are going to be brought into the tax network.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
You were listening to a discussion on review of GST implementation. The participants were Paramjeet Khanna, expert on taxation, and Chandrasekhar, journalist. The program was produced and presented by the News Services Division of All India Radio. This program is also available on our website newsonair.nic.in. You may email your opinion about this program at airnsdtalks@gmail.com.